And if anything I said about that man is untrue, I invite him wholeheartedly to sue me for libel, to sue me for slander.
Hey guys, it's Sean O'Connell, the Managing Director here at CinemaBlend, and your resident Snyder Cut expert, back with another Snyder Cut video here on CinemaBlend's YouTube page. And we want to get into the situation between Ray Fisher and Warner Brothers Pictures, because a lot of people might be seeing on their timeline the hashtag #IStandWithRayFisher and wondering exactly what is going on. There's a lot of details that we need to get into, and it's almost gotten to the stage of he said, they said kind of thing. But while we're at this point, I want to sort of backtrack, fill in the gaps, see where Ray is, see where Warner Brothers is, and then discuss it in the aftermath. The conversation starts when Ray Fisher has brought up some allegations about misconduct that happened on the set of Justice League after Zack Snyder walked away from the project. Now, by this point, you guys know that Joss Whedon was brought on board, likely by producers Geoff Johns and John Berg, who were sort of overseeing the DC universe at that point, and they wanted to take the Justice League film in a different direction, heading a little bit more towards the Marvel-friendly hope and optimism, sarcasm, lighter tone than what Zack was originally going to deliver.
Well, that was fun while it didn't last.
It's unusual that we haven't heard from Joss Whedon about anything that he did on Justice League. He's never done any press for the film. He has not talked about what he did working with the cast. He didn't do the press junket when Justice League came out in theaters in 2017. So his side of that story has never really been clear. And that's unusual because if he's proud of the work that he did, you think he would come out and speak about it. And now that these allegations are sort of being thrown around about the way that he treated the people on set, you think that he might want to come forward and defend himself. Because Ray Fisher, specifically, in the initial tweet that sort of started this larger conversation, tweeted on July 1st, Joss Whedon's on-set treatment of the cast and crew of Justice League was gross, abusive, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable. He was enabled in many ways by Geoff Johns and John Berg. Accountability is greater than entertainment. Now you'll see that accountability is greater than entertainment used by a lot of people who are standing with Ray Fisher. And there's been a lot of speculation about how the Justice League cast was treated in the wake of Zack Snyder leaving. And it's difficult because they were tied to the production and they had to do all the things that Joss Whedon wanted them to do as the replacement director. And that has led to scenes in the theatrical cut that people deem to be truly humiliating, such as Ezra Miller having to fall on Wonder Woman's chest for the point of a laugh line, Batman having to make some jokes and puns that just don't fit the character.
Sorry, guys. I didn't bring a sword. Jesus. He is tall.
Please don't ever say that to me again.
And of course it comes down to Ray Fisher having to deliver Cyborg's catchphrase of "Booyah." And we learned later on that that was something that was a divisive fact between producer John Berg and Ray Fisher, because Fisher, in his own words, is essentially saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, he didn't want to necessarily be the cool black actor who had to spit out catchphrases, even though "Booyah" is, yes, a phrase that's linked to Cyborg, but probably more closely tied to the animated version that you see in Teen Titans.
Booyah! Booyah! I'm not doing this on purpose.
Fans who have been pushing this narrative of Geoff Johns and Joss Whedon and John Berg to a certain extent were the ones responsible for forcing Zack Snyder out. These are speculations and conspiracy theories that have been floated for years, essentially since 2017. And so he has no goodwill to lean on with the fans.
Not really.
So this is Ray Fisher basically giving oxygen to those arguments. And even when he was speaking at JusticeCon, which was the fan-driven convention that was held in July, Ray went a little bit deeper into breathing some life into this narrative when he said,
and if anything I said about that man is untrue, I invite him wholeheartedly to sue me for libel, to sue me for slander. Anything. And on the John Berg side of things, because I know he had something he wanted to say about it, and I'm getting a little bit heated, and I'm not going to go ahead and keep it that way. But on the John Berg side of things, his denial of the situation, like his denial of the enabling of that situation, was asinine, it was tone deaf, and it was completely disrespectful to the situation at hand. That man is scared, and he should also be, because we're going to get to the heart of it.
Again, at this stage, this is very much Ray Fisher's word against that of the producers on Justice League and the people at Warner Brothers Pictures. who he is calling out on the table. And again, using that sort of accountability is greater than entertainment. Some fans have come out and said, Ray, isn't this sort of going against your non-disclosure agreement? Or how come you can't give us even more specific details? How come you're not able to speak openly about this? And he talked about that on an Instagram Live.
Someone says, is my NDA over? No, it is not. I am still very much under contract, and I am still very much under a non-disclosure agreement. So I've got to be very careful about what I say and how I say it. Otherwise, I can get sued into oblivion.
So he's being cautious about even what he details. But little by little, he would start to, on social media, support people like Kai Cole and Charisma Carpenter, who worked with Joss Whedon on Buffy, as they came out and said things that happened to them with Joss Whedon, which backed up his claim that he didn't get along with Joss Whedon. Now, listen, actors and directors don't get along. They don't always have to get along. They're not always married to each other, and they don't always have the same creative approaches to different projects. And here, just to take Joss's point of view for a second.
You lunatics better know what you're doing.
This is a director who's coming on board and taking over a project from a cast that was handpicked by a different director in Zack Snyder, and trying to answer to the directives that were being handed down to him by the powers that be, which is make this movie lighter, more audience friendly, more accessible.
Itchy.
But I think that there were ways that Joss probably could have done that and still kept the relationships strong between the cast. And again, I'm basing that solely on what Ray Fisher is pointing out and saying to people. So as this back and forth was going on, we finally got some news in August that Warner Brothers is going to be launching a internal investigation. They're going to look into these claims that Ray Fisher is making and hopefully bring to light or drag out into the light from the shadows the truth of what happened during those reshoots on Justice League. And so let's get into that in our next section. Before we go much further into Ray Fisher's side of this conversation, I want to touch briefly on where Warner Brothers stands on this, because I think it's important for people to sort of step back and take a look at the big picture.
I'm old-fashioned that way.
There are people who were in place at Warner Brothers during 2017 when Justice League was going through its production cycle that aren't there anymore. But Ray is specifically calling out people who he worked with on those Justice League reshoots and was tying it directly back to work that he did under Geoff Johns when he was in Los Angeles. For people who are completely unaware and are coming into this video to truly figure out what's going on with Ray Fisher and Warner Brothers, Geoff Johns wanted to position himself as the Kevin Feige of the DC Extended Universe. He wanted to sort of, as a producer, oversee the direction that all these films were going in. But for a little while, in the early stages of the game, Zack Snyder was going to be that person. And he was starting with Man of Steel and extending into BVS. And then Zack was also producing, along with Debbie Snyder, the work that Patty Jenkins was doing on Wonder Woman and was going to do some consulting work and producing for Aquaman. They were all going to be tendrils that sort of spun out from the Snyderverse.
Something tells me we're not getting the band back together.
Geoff Johns and Zack Snyder allegedly got along for a while and then disagreed. Geoff Johns and John Berg wanted to go in one direction, and Zack was content to going in another. And then when Zack stepped away from Justice League, Geoff Johns assumedly saw this as his opportunity to sort of step in, put in his director Joss Whedon, who he would prefer to go in that different direction with, and shape everything forward towards movies that are more like Shazam, Wonder Woman 1984, and the direction the DCEU is going in up to this point. So Warner Brothers, they potentially, at that stage, I would guess, trust in both Geoff Johns and John Berg to make the right decision to bring in a replacement director and continue to extend Zack's vision of what he was going to do in Justice League. And that is a line that the Snyder Cut fans point to all the time when they say that at the time, the Warner Brothers producers, specifically, I think it was Toby Emmerich who told them Joss Whedon was really just there to conclude Zack's vision and was not going to be doing drastic reshoots. And it turned out that that was completely wrong.
I don't recognize this world.
You could go so far as to say that it was a lie to potentially get Snyder fans to buy tickets for opening weekend.
I'm here for him.
But then it turned out that Joss was greenlit to reshoot up to 80 to 90% of the footage, and theatrical cut is nothing like what Zack is going to deliver in his Justice League. So when the studio turns to the people who are debating whether they should be trusted versus Ray Fisher, the fans are saying it's hard for us to believe your side of it when you lied to us back in 2017. You don't have much of a leg to stand on.
Yeah, that's the abridged version.
This speaks to then what happened to Ray Fisher, who has called into question the legitimacy of the internal investigation into his claims, because he does not want to see this entire thing just railroaded through to the benefit of Warner Brothers Pictures. So on September 4th, Ray Fisher basically shot holes through the entire procedure by saying, "So you can better understand how deep this goes. After speaking out about Justice League, I received a phone call from the president of DC Films, who would be Walter Hamada, wherein he attempted to throw Joss Whedon and John Berg under the bus in hopes that I would relent on Geoff Johns. I will not." And he includes with accountability is greater than entertainment. Now that is when you step back and look at it, that's a hand grenade dropped into an already contentious situation, because Walter Hamada was not tied to all of this back in 2017. And here we need to sort of differentiate between Warner Brothers Pictures and Warner Media as a whole, which is the larger entity, and not necessarily, it seems, the people that Ray Fisher has a problem with. He's specifically calling out people who are directly tied to Warner Brothers Pictures. And so you start to ask the question, why would Warner Brothers and DC Entertainment still want to protect Geoff Johns? Listen, I know that it's he said, she said type of situation, and you don't want to pick sides until all of the evidence is on the table, but I have to ask myself why Ray Fisher would do this if he didn't have the receipts to back this up.
I agree.
Well, instead of letting the investigation proceed, Warner Brothers responded. And it's important to pay attention to what they said in their statement after Ray Fisher's September 4th tweet. So I want to read chunks of this. They said, in July, Ray Fisher's representatives asked DC Films president Walter Hamada to talk to Mr. Fisher about his concerns during the production of Justice League. The two had previously spoken when Mr. Hamada asked him to reprise his role as Cyborg in Warner Brothers' upcoming Flash movie together with other members of the Justice League. Now, this is important because some people have said, like, oh, Ray Fisher's only doing this because his future in the DCEU is over. Like, he's not going to be coming back. He was Zack Snyder's choice to play Cyborg. Geoff Johns actually had another actor play Cyborg in Doom Patrol. And according to some reports that you saw, he I think they came from Ray Fisher, that Geoff Johns called Ray Fisher to sort of brag about the fact that he got another actor to play Cyborg. Like, there's no love lost between those two, obviously, if you pay attention to what Ray Fisher is saying. But now it turns out that Ray Fisher is still negotiating for a future role as Cyborg, maybe not in a solo film, but to show up in that Flashpoint movie with Ezra Miller that's also bringing Ben Affleck's Batman back. So those are direct ties to the Snyderverse that Ray should have, and it feels like he was still somewhat negotiating with the studio. At this point now, I have no idea though. In their July conversation, Mr. Fisher recounted disagreements he had with the film's creative team regarding his portrayal of Cyborg and complained that his suggested script revisions were not adopted. Mr. Hamada explained that creative differences are a normal part of the production process and that a film's writer-director ultimately has to be in charge of these matters. Now, I agree with that. There are creative differences on film sets all the time. An actor can absolutely voice their concerns, but ultimately, I think the vision of that film needs to come down to the writer-director. And yes, I think that the vision for the theatrical cut of Justice League, as bad as it is attributable to Joss Whedon, and he should have been able to make the decisions that he made. Now, this is an important part that comes from Warner Brothers' statement following Ray Fisher's tweet about Mr. Hamada. He said, at no time did Mr. Hamada ever throw anyone under the bus, as Mr. Fisher has falsely claimed, or render any judgments about the Justice League production, in which Mr. Hamada had no involvement since filming occurred before Mr. Hamada was elevated to his current position. The statement goes on to conclude that this investigator has attempted multiple times to meet with Mr. Fisher to discuss his concerns, but to date, Mr. Fisher has declined to speak to the investigator. Warner Brothers remains committed to accountability and to the well-being of every cast and crew member on each of its productions. It also remains committed to investigating any specific and credible allegation of misconduct, which thus far Mr. Fisher has failed to provide. Now, that's a mic drop if you are trying to bring an argument against a studio. If a studio releases a statement like that, you would almost think, okay, game over. I lost this fight. But that's not what happened. Ray Fisher's keeping the fight going, and we're going to dive into that in our next section.
Let's do it.
So now let's get to Ray Fisher's response to Warner Brothers' response to Ray Fisher's accusations. Ray Fisher basically said that he did get on the phone with the investigators who were hired by Warner Brothers Pictures in order to discuss what had happened, and immediately got concerned because he was meeting specifically with Warner Brothers Pictures people, and not Warner Media in general. I think Ray, without putting words in his mouth, thinks that if the investigation is only going through Warner Brothers Pictures, then it's an internal investigation that is only being done to the benefit of the studio. Ray let out an email that he shared with everybody that he shared with his team immediately after the phone call with the internal investigators took place. And in that note, Ray says, "Hey crew, I just got off the line with the investigator. I had to end the interview early before going into detail with him. He's definitely been put on the case by Warner Brothers Pictures, not Warner Media. His findings will go directly and solely to Warner Brothers Pictures legal. He also had another person on the line as a witness, which we weren't made aware of. I told him I needed to have a rep on the line as security for myself." Again, that's Ray Fisher having receipts. "He tried to keep me on the line, but I told him I would need to consult my team before proceeding. It's also worth noting that I made it clear to the world on August 21st that I would be vetting the investigator to ensure a fair and protected process for all witnesses. At WB Pictures has escalated this to an entirely different level, but I'm ready to meet the challenge."
Ride ain't over yet.
I can't emphasize that enough. Like, when you point out the fact that Ray Fisher is willing to go to bat with Warner Brothers Pictures, a studio that he is still theoretically negotiating to collaborate with, that he is still willing to go against the people who mistreated him and cast members, as he is pointing out on the set of those Justice League reshoots, puts so much stock behind the slogan that he's making into a public campaign, which is accountability is greater than entertainment. And that's why you're seeing the hashtag I stand with Ray Fisher by a lot of people from the Snyder Cut movement, who are basically just transitioning the fight that they had for artistic integrity and to defend Zack's right or ability to release his version of Justice League. They're now shifting all that weight and attention and support behind Ray Fisher, who they feel was wronged by the people who were brought in to replace Zack Snyder, and they also would like to see accountability for everything that allegedly happened.
We're with you till it's done.
Now, I get it. That's a lot of information to process, and some of you may be paying attention to this saying, hey, I just wanted to see a Justice League movie. I totally get that. But this is a really important story to stay on as the Snyder Cut movement is rolling along. And when we do get to see Zack Snyder's Justice League hit HBO Max, I think a lot of this is going to be really important because we do have questions about what happened after Zack Snyder left and Joss Whedon came on board. Some of you may be wondering, where are the rest of the members of the league? Why are they not speaking up? Well, they're starting to. It was important, really important, to see Jason Momoa recently shared on his Instagram stories the hashtag I stand with Ray Fisher. That's important for so many different reasons. One, Momoa still has a contract with Warner Brothers. He is their Aquaman, and he's planning on appearing in Aquaman 2. He's an investment for them. He's in their Dune, and again, he's the lead in Aquaman 2. So him throwing his support behind Ray Fisher was significant, and I kind of half expect some more members of the league to stand up and stand shoulder to shoulder with Ray Fisher to voice their concerns over things that might have happened on the set of those reshoots. This might also be not as important, but I am kind of wondering how this is going to have an effect on the promotion and publicity for Zack Snyder's Justice League coming to HBO Max next year, because when everybody's getting along and Ray is part of the family and in the fold of the studio, he would be an integral part to promoting Cyborg's role in Zack Snyder's Justice League. Zack has gone so far as to say that Cyborg is the heart of that film, and you can see in the trailer footage that there's a lot more Cyborg and Victor Stone stuff that we didn't get to see in theatrical. And it sort of feeds the narrative that actors of color ended up on the cutting room floor. So when we see Zack Snyder's Justice League coming to HBO Max, I want to hear from Ray Fisher, and I hope that his arguments with Warner Brothers Pictures and Warner Media will not stop them from allowing him to speak.
So do I.
As much as has happened so far in this story, I honestly believe that there's a lot more to come, and it could potentially get pretty ugly as the studio continues to push back against Ray Fisher's accusations, and Ray digs in his heels because I do not see him budging one way or the other, which makes me question what the resolution for this is going to be. I think we're just going to continue to track this story as more details come out about Ray Fisher's allegations. The studio brings more things to light as maybe this internal investigation continues on, and we see where this goes. Now, again, we started this series as a way to sort of celebrate everything going on with Zack Snyder and the fact that he's bringing his Snyder Cut to HBO Max, but it's impossible to overlook these bigger stories that are hanging over the cast and affecting their work and their contributions to the Snyder Cut in general. And so we'll continue to sort of keep track of it and see where it's going. While you're here, do me a favor, head down to the comment section, weigh in on how you feel things are going between Ray Fisher and the studio. You can hit subscribe and turn on your notifications while you're down there, because we're putting up Snyder Cut videos like this every single week, and we want to make sure the members of the community come by and watch them.